Have you ever loved someone who pulled away the moment you got close? Someone who looked at you with deep emotion one day and acted distant the next? Listen carefully, because this will change the way you see love forever. The people who fear love the most are often the ones who need it the deepest. And the painful truth is this: sometimes the coldest hearts are secretly praying for someone strong enough not to leave. See, most people misunderstand avoidance. They think avoidants don't care. They think avoidants are heartless, but that's not true. Many avoidants feel deeply, sometimes more deeply than anyone else in the room. The difference is they learned long ago that vulnerability can lead to pain, rejection, betrayal, or loss of identity. So what do? They test, not because they want to destroy love, but because they are terrified of surrendering to it. An avoidant will test your patience before they trust your intentions. They will test your consistency before they reveal their heart. They will test your emotional stability before they allow themselves to depend on you. And most people fail the test because they react emotionally instead of responding consciously. When and the avoidant pulls away, insecure people chase. When the avoidant becomes silent, fearful people panic. When the avoidant creates distance, wounded people take it personally. But powerful love, mature love, understands something deeper. People don't test you where they are strong. They test you where they are afraid. That distance.
Fear. That silence. Fear.
That mixed signal. Fear. And if you don't understand this, you will enter a war trying to force closeness from someone whose soul is fighting to feel safe. The strongest thing you can ever do is stop taking another person's fear as a statement about your worth. Because when you know who you are, you stop begging for reassurance. You stop collapsing emotionally every time someone withdraws. You stop trying to rescue people from wounds they must heal themselves. And here's the divine principle: love cannot grow where pressure exists. Real love is not control. Real love is not emotional addiction. Real love is emotional certainty in the middle of uncertainty. An avoidant secretly watches how you respond when they retreat. Do you become angry? Do you become needy? Do you abandon yourself trying to keep them? Or do you remain undid, centered, calm, powerful? Because calm energy feels safe. Desperation feels dangerous. Understand this. Avoidants are not looking for perfection. They are looking for emotional safety without losing themselves. That is why your energy matters more than your words. If you constantly demand validation, they feel trapped. If you constantly pursue, they feel overwhelmed. If you constantly pressure them to open up before they are ready, they shut down even more. But when you stand in strength, when you respect yourself, communicate clearly, maintain your peace, and refuse to play emotional games, something shifts. Your certainty becomes magnetic, because human beings heal in the presence of safety, not chaos. And maybe the greatest lesson here is this: you cannot love someone into transformation by abandoning yourself. Let me say that again, because somebody needs to hear it. You cannot love someone into transformation by abandoning yourself. Do not confuse self-sacrifice with love. Do not confuse anxiety with passion. Do not confuse emotional chasing with connection. Healthy love requires two whole people choosing each other consciously. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for an avoidant is not chase them, but inspire them through your grounded presence. Because when someone realizes you are not trying to control them, fix them, or consume them, they finally feel space to breathe. And in that space, walls begin to fall, not because you forced them, but because your strength gave them permission to trust. Remember this for the rest of your life. The right connection will never require you to lose your dignity to keep love alive. You are not here to beg for crumbs of affection. You are here to embody a love so powerful, so rooted, so emotionally free that it awakens truth in everyone around you. And when you become that person calm in chaos, strong in uncertainty, loving without losing yourself. You stop attracting relationships based on fear. You begin attracting relationships built on truth, trust, and emotional freedom. That is real power. That is real love. And that is where transformation begins. One of the deepest misunderstandings about emotionally avoidant people is believing that distance means a lack of love. In reality, many avoidants create distance precisely because the connection matters so much to them. When feelings become intense, their instinct is not always to move closer. It is often to step back and protect themselves. What looks cold on the outside is frequently fear operating beneath the surface. Avoidants do not usually test love in direct ways. They rarely come forward and ask, "Will you stay if I'm afraid?" Instead, they communicate through behavior. They become quieter. They delay responses. They pull away emotionally after moments of closeness. They create uncertainty, not because they enjoy hurting people, but because closeness activates old fears buried deep inside them. Somewhere in their emotional history, vulnerability became connected to pain, disappointment, rejection, or loss of freedom. So they test, not consciously in every moment, but emotionally and instinctively. When an avoidant creates space, they are often trying to answer one powerful question inside themselves. What will happen if I stop controlling the connection? They fear being overwhelmed, consumed, abandoned, or emotionally exposed. And because they fear these outcomes, they watch carefully how the other person responds to distance.
Many people react to this distance with panic. They chase harder, demand reassurance.
Ants become emotionally reactive or try to force closeness. But to an avoidant, pressure feels unsafe. The more intense the pursuit becomes, the more their nervous system tells them to retreat. It is not always because they do not care. Often, it is because they care so deeply that the emotional intensity feels threatening. An avoidant secretly observes whether someone can remain emotionally grounded without forcing intimacy. They notice who respects boundaries without disappearing. They notice who can stay calm instead of turning every moment of silence into conflict. Deep down, they are searching for emotional safety, even if they struggle to admit it openly. This creates one of the greatest paradoxes in relationships. The avoidant wants connection, but fears dependency. They desire closeness, but resist vulnerability. They want love, but fear what love might demand from them emotionally. So they create distance to regain control over feelings that feel too powerful inside them. Sometimes this testing looks subtle. They may suddenly become busy after an intimate conversation. They may avoid discussing emotions right after sharing something vulnerable. They may act distant after. Moments of deep affection. To the other person, this behavior can feel confusing or even hurtful. But internally, the avoidant is trying to regulate emotional overwhelm. What they truly want to know is whether love can exist without pressure, guilt, or emotional chaos. The people who pass these tests are usually not the loudest or most emotionally reactive. They are the ones who maintain self-respect, emotional stability, and patience. They do not chase endlessly, but they also do not punish withdrawal with cruelty. They understand that another person's fear is not always a reflection of their own value. That kind of grounded energy feels safe to an avoidant, because for perhaps the first time they encounter someone who is not trying to control them emotionally. Someone who allows connection to grow naturally instead of demanding immediate certainty. And in that environment, trust slowly begins to replace fear. The truth is, avoidants are often not testing whether you love them. They are testing whether love itself is safe. And until they believe it is, distance becomes their shield, even from the people they secretly care about the most. Silence can become a language for people who are afraid of emotional exposure, For an avoidant, withdrawal is often not random behavior. It is a defense mechanism built over years of protecting themselves from emotional pain. While others may express love openly through closeness, reassurance, and vulnerability, avoidants frequently communicate through distance, inconsistency, and emotional restraint. And hidden beneath those behaviors is a quiet test that most people never fully understand. Avoidants do not always ask directly for reassurance because needing reassurance itself can make them feel weak or dependent. Instead, they unconsciously create situations that reveal how emotionally secure the other person truly is. They may disappear for a while after intense connection. They may become emotionally unavailable right when the relationship starts feeling deeper. They may send mixed signals, warm one moment, distant the next, not because they enjoy confusion, but because closeness triggers fear inside them. The deeper the connection becomes, the more vulnerable they feel. And vulnerability to an avoidant nervous system can feel dangerous. So they test through silence. They wonder, if I pull away, will this person become controlling? If I need space, will they punish me emotionally? If I stop communicating for a moment, will they abandon me or attack me? These questions are rarely spoken aloud, but they shape the avoidance behavior in powerful ways. Their inconsistency is often an attempt to manage the emotional tension between wanting intimacy and fearing it at the same time. To someone on the receiving end, this can feel exhausting. One day, the avoidant seems fully present, emotionally connected, and invested. The next day, they seem detached, distracted, or unreachable. The sudden shift creates insecurity, and many people respond by chasing harder. They send more messages, demand explanations, seek constant reassurance, or try to force emotional conversations. But pressure usually intensifies the avoidance fear, because avoidants often associate emotional demands with losing freedom, autonomy, or safety. The more emotionally cornered they feel, the stronger their urge becomes to escape or shut down. What appears to others as emotional coldness is often emotional self-protection. At the core of these tests is fear of dependence, fear of disappointment, fear of rejection, and fear of losing control over their emotions. Many avoidants learned early in life that relying on others could lead to pain. Some grew up in environments where emotional needs were ignored, criticized, or met inconsistently. Over time, they adapted by learning to suppress vulnerability and rely only on themselves. But even the most emotionally guarded people still desire connection. That is why avoidants often feel torn internally. Part of them longs for closeness, while another part feels threatened by it. They want love, but they fear the emotional exposure that comes with being fully seen. So instead of moving toward love directly, they move in cycles, approaching, retreating, reconnecting, and withdrawing again. What they are secretly observing is whether someone can handle emotional uncertainty without becoming emotionally unsafe themselves. Can someone stay calm during moments of distance? Can someone communicate without aggression or desperation? Can someone respect space without disappearing entirely? These behaviors matter deeply to an avoidant because safety matters more to them than intensity. The irony is that avoidants often crave stable love more than chaotic passion. Chaos confirms their fears. Calmness challenges them to trust. And when they finally encounter someone who responds to silence with maturity instead of emotional volatility, something inside them slowly softens. Not immediately, not perfectly, but gradually they begin to realize that vulnerability may not always lead to pain. And for someone who has spent years protecting themselves from emotional exposure, that realization can feel life-changing. One of the greatest contradictions inside an avoidant person is that they often crave deep emotional connection while simultaneously fearing it. From the outside, they may appear independent, detached, or emotionally distant. They may act as though they do not need anyone, but beneath that controlled exterior is frequently a person who longs for love, understanding, closeness, and emotional peace just as deeply as anyone else. The problem is not the desire for connection. The problem is the fear attached to it. Avoidants often associate intimacy with losing control. Somewhere in their emotional development, they learned that depending on others could lead to disappointment, rejection, suffocation, criticism, or emotional pain. As a result, they trained themselves to rely heavily on self-protection. Independence became their survival strategy. Emotional distance became their shield. So even when they meet someone they genuinely care about, an internal battle begins. Part of them wants to move closer. Another part wants to run. This is why avoidance can sometimes appear confusing in relationships. They may pursue connection intensely at first, then suddenly pull away once the emotional bond deepens. They may express affection one day and seem emotionally unavailable the next. It is not always manipulation. Often, it is fear responding to emotional vulnerability. The closer they feel to someone, the more exposed they feel emotionally. And exposure feels dangerous when someone has spent years believing that vulnerability leads to pain. Many avoidants secretly fear losing their identity inside relationships. They worry that emotional closeness will demand too much from them, consume their freedom, or overwhelm them emotionally. Love begins to feel less like safety and more like pressure. So when emotions become too intense, their instinct is often to create distance in order to regain a sense of control. This does not mean they stop caring. In fact, sometimes avoidants withdraw precisely because they care so much. The emotional stakes become higher and their nervous system responds by activating protection mechanisms. They may become quieter, less expressive, or emotionally unavailable because internally they are trying to calm fears they do not fully know how to communicate. One of the deepest fears avoidants carry is the fear of being emotionally trapped. They fear losing autonomy, disappointing someone they love, or being unable to meet emotional expectations. Rather than risk failing emotionally, they retreat before vulnerability becomes too overwhelming. At the same time, they still desire love deeply. They want someone who understands them without forcing them, someone who respects their space without abandoning them, someone who brings peace instead of emotional chaos. This is why emotionally safe relationships can feel unfamiliar to avoidants at first. Calm love may even feel uncomfortable because their nervous system has become conditioned to expect pressure, unpredictability, or emotional overwhelm. Stability requires trust, and trust is difficult for someone who has spent years acting themselves emotionally. Many avoidants also struggle to express emotional needs openly. Instead of saying, "I'm scared," they become distant. Instead of saying, "I care deeply," they may minimize emotions or act unaffected. Their behavior often hides feelings they do not fully know how to process or communicate. The tragedy is that people frequently misinterpret this fear as indifference. But avoidants are not always avoiding love itself. Often they are avoiding the possibility of pain attached to love. They are trying to protect parts of themselves that once felt unsafe, rejected, or emotionally overwhelmed. And when they finally experience a connection where they do not feel controlled, pressured, or emotionally consumed, something begins to change inside them. Slowly, they start lowering defenses they once believed were necessary for survival. They begin to realize that intimacy does not always have to cost them their freedom, identity, or peace. One of the most important things to understand about avoidance is that they are constantly observing emotional energy, even when they appear distant or detached. While other people may openly ask for reassurance, avoidants often study how someone behaves under emotional pressure. Their greatest test is not about grand romantic gestures or dramatic declarations of love. It is much quieter than that. They want to know whether someone can remain emotionally steady without becoming controlling, reactive, or dependent. When an avoidant pulls away, most people instinctively chase. Fear rises quickly. Questions begin to flood the mind. Did I do something wrong? Why are they distant? Are they losing interest? That anxiety often turns into emotional pressure, repeated messages, demands for clarity, emotional outbursts, or attempts to force connection. But to an avoidant, emotional pressure feels unsafe. The more emotionally chaotic the response becomes, the more their nervous system tells them to retreat even further. What they secretly seek is someone who can handle uncertainty without collapsing emotionally. Someone who does not abandon themselves the moment distance appears. This is the hidden test. Can you stay grounded when connection feels unstable? Can you remain calm without trying to force reassurance? Can you respect space without punishing withdrawal? Avoidants notice these things deeply even if, they never say it aloud. They pay attention to whether someone becomes emotionally explosive during moments of distance. They observe whether love quickly turns into guilt, manipulation, or control. And because many avoidants carry fears rooted in emotional overwhelm, they instinctively move away from people who make them feel trapped. What makes this difficult is that many people mistake emotional chasing for love. They believe that constantly pursuing, over-explaining, or fighting for attention proves devotion. But secure love is not built through panic. It is built through emotional stability. An avoidant often feels safest around people who can regulate their own emotions instead of demanding constant reassurance. Calm energy communicates safety. Desperation communicates instability. This does not mean becoming emotionally cold or pretending not to care. It means developing the strength to stay connected to yourself even when another person becomes distant. It means understanding that someone else's withdrawal is not always a reflection of your worth. Emotionally secure people do not immediately abandon themselves trying to hold on to connection. They maintain their dignity, end dairies and peace while still communicating with honesty and maturity. That balance feels incredibly important to avoidants because it removes the fear of emotional engulfment. Many avoidants secretly fear relationships where they lose freedom, independence, or emotional breathing room. They worry that closeness will come with constant demands, emotional dependency, or pressure to perform emotionally in ways they are not ready for. So they watch carefully to see whether someone can love without controlling. Can someone give space without becoming cold? Can someone communicate needs without emotional aggression? Can someone remain patient without losing self-respect? These questions matter more to avoidance than perfect communication or constant affection. Ironically, the people who often draw avoidance closer are not the ones who chase hardest. They are the ones who create emotional safety through steadiness. They do not react impulsively every time uncertainty appears. They understand that healthy connection cannot grow inside emotional chaos. That grounded presence slowly lowers the avoidance defenses. Because for perhaps the first time, they begin to experience a connection that does not feel overwhelming or consuming. They begin to realize they can be imperfect, uncertain, and vulnerable without immediately facing pressure or emotional punishment. And in that kind of emotional environment, trust has room to grow naturally instead of being forced through fear. Real transformation in relationships does not happen through pressure, emotional chasing, or forcing someone to open their heart before they feel safe. It happens through the combination of patience, strength, boundaries, and emotional certainty. And this is especially true when loving someone with avoidant tendencies. The mistake many people make is believing that more effort, more sacrifice, or more emotional intensity will heal the distance. But healing does not grow through pressure. It grows through safety. Avoidants are highly sensitive to emotional energy, even when they appear disconnected on the surface. They can feel when love becomes desperation. They can sense when affection turns into control. The moment they feel emotionally trapped or overwhelmed, their instinct is often to retreat. Not because they do not care, but because their nervous system has learned to associate intense emotions. Demands with danger. This is why patience becomes powerful. Patience is not weakness. It is emotional discipline. It is the ability to remain calm without forcing immediate outcomes. When someone responds to an avoidance fear with patience instead of pressure, it creates an environment where trust can slowly develop. The avoidant begins to realize they are not being emotionally hunted or controlled. That realization matters deeply, but patience alone is not enough. Transformation also requires strength, not aggressive strength, not dominance, but grounded emotional strength, the ability to stay connected to your own peace, values, and self-respect, even when the relationship feels uncertain. Avoidants often test emotional stability because they fear emotional chaos. If someone falls apart every time distance appears, it reinforces the avoidant's belief that relationships are overwhelming and unsafe. Strength communicates security. It says, "I care about you deeply, but I will not lose myself trying to keep this connection alive." That energy feels safe because it removes emotional pressure from the relationship. It allows connection to breathe instead of suffocating under feature. Planning, and anxiety, boundaries are equally important. Many people think love means endless tolerance or self-sacrifice, but healthy boundaries are one of the clearest expressions of self-respect. Avoidants may withdraw when they feel controlled, but they also lose respect for relationships where boundaries do not exist. Deep down, they want to know that the other person has emotional stability and a strong sense of identity. Boundaries create clarity. They communicate that love can exist without emotional manipulation, guilt, or dependency. They prevent resentment from building. They allow both people to remain emotionally responsible for themselves instead of making the relationship responsible for their inner peace. This is where emotional certainty becomes transformational. Emotional certainty does not mean controlling the outcome of the relationship. It means being secure in your own value regardless of another person's temporary withdrawal. It means understanding that someone else's fear is not proof that you are unworthy of love. Avoidants often expect people to react from fear because fear is what they understand most deeply. They expect chasing emotional volatility or abandonment. But when they encounter someone who remains calm, honest, grounded, and emotionally secure, it challenges their old beliefs about relationships. For perhaps the first time, they experience love that does not feel suffocating, love that does not demand perfection, love that allows space without disconnecting emotionally. And that is what creates real transformation. Not forcing vulnerability, but creating safety around it. Not rescuing someone from their wounds, but refusing to contribute to them. Not losing yourself inside love, but standing firmly in your own emotional truth while still offering compassion. Because the deepest healing often happens when someone realizes they can be loved without fear, controlled without pressure, and connected without losing themselves in the process. So remember this, the deepest connections are not built through chasing, control, or emotional pressure, but through patience, strength, understanding, and the courage to love without losing yourself. When you become emotionally grounded, you stop reacting from fear and start creating relationships rooted in trust, peace, and true connection.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening with
An open heart, and never forget the love you seek begins with the energy you choose to embody every single day. Stay strong, stay conscious, and until next time, goodbye and God bless you.